Welcome to the Recess Life Podcast. This is the place where we explore play and what it means to get back to your inner child. I'm Louise, your host. Join me as I chat with teachers, entrepreneurs, artists, and thought leaders about how we can live a life of more play and impact. Let's get it started. Hello, Recess Life listeners. Welcome back for another episode. My guest today is Isabel Behncke. She is a primatologist and evolutionary biologist. I first discovered Isabel's work from her 2011 TED Talk, Evolution's Gift of Play. So Isabel spent 3 years in the jungles of Congo studying bonobos. Bonobos are a primate that are our closest living relative on this earth. And by studying bonobos, she discovered a lot about human behavior because, well, we're a primate too, right? She discovered that play is a natural instinct in primates and that it serves a huge biological purpose. For our conversation, I really wanted to understand how Isabel became fascinated by bonobos in the first place, that she would give up 3 years of her life to study them in the wild. Because if you think about it, going to the jungles of Congo for that amount of time is a little crazy if you think about it. We talked about why play is a gift from evolution that dates way, way back to ancient times. We talked about how discovering play has really changed Isabel as a person, because before studying bonobos, Isabel called herself a self-proclaimed serious nerd. She's still a nerd, but I would say she's a lot more fun now too. At the end of this episode, if you can't be convinced that play is important from an evolutionary biologist who studied bonobos for 3 years in the jungle, I don't know what will. Make sure you stay on till the end of the episode, where I'll recap some of the nuggets that we talked about in our conversation. I'll catch you at the end.
Yeah.
And would you say your primary occupation is a primatologist or an evolutionary biologist? Do you have anything specific that you call yourself, Isabel?
Evolutionary biologist, primatologist. We also use the word ethologist. An ethologist is somebody that studies behavior of people and animals in natural conditions. It's kind of like the science of observation.
When did you become interested in animals and studying their natural habitats?
My first friend was a parrot that I tamed when I was age 8 years old. And he lived on my shoulder for many, many years. And when you live with an animal, long-lived, intelligent, large-brained animal like a parrot, of course, in absolute terms, their brains are small, but in relative terms, they're large.
Yep.
You learn many things.
Yes. Oh,
so
wow.
kind of my parrot taught me, parrots are kind of feathered apes, right? They're highly social, they're very intelligent, but also they're very vocal. So I learned many things from my parrot. Also spent a lot of time with other animals like horses or chinchillas and all sorts of things. Yeah, so I was always interested in animals, I suppose.
From the age you were a child, it seems like it really it sparked in you something that stayed with you for the rest of your life. I think who we are when we are children, if we don't lose that sense of wonder and spirit, there's a lot of wisdom in that, right?
Yeah, for sure. And related to play also, people like Stu Brown would say, think of the ways that you played as a child. And often the most virtuous combinations of work and play and creativity as an adult have to do with the way you played as a child. And it's interesting to think of that because, some of us play more with words. Some of us play more with other kids, some of us play with our imaginations. And for me, I think a lot of play was with animals as my companions of adventures. So I think a component of that still has definitely stayed on.
Yes. He talks about play personalities
Yes, yeah,
and the different ways we tend to gravitate towards play.
yeah,
And yeah, I think I'm more of an explorer.
yeah,
Um,
for sure.
you grew up in Chile. When did you decide to study primatology and evolutionary biology?
So I first did conservation biology. So I worked in that for a few years, and that led to a profound frustration with with human behavior, because of course, you know, I could see that we were failing at trying to conserve ecosystems and biodiversity. So I got very, very frustrated, and I was very depressed, and decided to drop the world of conservation, and that at the end of the day, well, it's all about, it's not a science problem or an ecological problem. We had enough knowledge. What we didn't know was about human behavior. So I decided to go study human behavior, but then it was so difficult to know, where to start, because, so many different disciplines and approaches, and, really where and who do you believe? And the insight I had was very simple, and study the origins of human behavior. Where do we come from? And I thought, okay, if I just do that, I will learn some useful things, and it will be, relevant somehow. And I didn't know how. So that led me to, meet bonobos, because then we were trying to figure out, who was our last common ancestor, and how was our last common ancestor? Was our last common ancestor more similar to chimpanzees, more similar to baboons? And then I came across this species called bonobos, so close to us, and yet so interesting and unknown.
So tell us about the time that you studied in the Congo. With how long ago was that, and how long did you do that for?
And I did a master's studying the behavior of bonobos in captivity in England, and it was really interesting. And I compared chimpanzees with bonobos, but of course this was only the beginning, right? You study the behavior of animals in the zoo, and it's wonderful because you're able to see them, live animals.
Right.
But I think, given my background, I really wanted to see them in the wild.
Yeah.
So that's when I went like, okay, I need to study bonobos in the wild. And people would say, I mean, very rightly, well, no, you can't, because they live in Congo, and that's kind of rather difficult.
That's crazy, Isabel.
See,
Yeah.
and there's only two sites, the Japanese side and the German Max Planck side. So I mean, that was a very good advice. So it took me a while, and it's a long story, but eventually, you arrive to a question where, rather than being a thing that you wake up one day going, oh, I need to do this crazy thing, one step leads to the other, and it becomes obvious that the thing to do is to go to Congo. Like, yeah, that's
Yeah.
what I need to do. So eventually, through a series of encounters and, luck and persistence and mistakes, I got there.
Yeah. Well, so
Yeah.
you didn't want to wake up and regret not having tried. And how long were you actually in the Congo studying bonobos?
For 3 years.
3 years.
So each year one long expedition.
Okay.
So it's the research site is a Japanese site called Wamba. Wamba was the first study site in the wild for bonobos. The Japanese set it up in the mid-70s, and it's in the line of the equator, so parallel zero, around 150 kilometers south of the River Congo. So it's a very, very remote place. So it's very difficult and expensive and dangerous and lengthy to get there.
Mm-hmm.
So when you want to stay there for a long time, because it's not like you can pop in and out.
Right. Yeah. It doesn't see a lot of visitors or tourists, I imagine.
No, not at all.
Not at all. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. So I love that you decided to look at human behavior and look at it from the perspective of the beginning and our closest living ancestor, essentially, because society is very is very modern, and but it's very new, right? So how can we look at human behavior from a perspective of way before society affected us? So that's what you decided to do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you try to basically look at what are the kind of uh, ancient components of societies and our behavior. What do we share with animals that are closely related to us? And these things give you hints of what can change and what is probably not going to change. Of course, today in the enormously rapid tempo of technological change that we have, we are absolutely obsessed, and rightly so, obsessed with, how will technology change the face of humanity? And, we are already seeing a lot of that. But I think in order to answer the question, we also have to ask ourselves how, not only what will change, but also what will not change. And in that sense, I think we have a lot to learn from primates, because studying other animals help us put ourselves in context. We are an animal, we are a social animal. We engage through, like we're doing now, you and I, we are of course using technology, but we are like nodding to each other, we are interfacing, we are like reading all these cues. The face-to-face interaction, for example, is very important for primates, and that includes us. So things like that, when you see that in the forest, in animals that are not humans, you think, well, how is that relevant to, the evolution of technology itself, and how can we think about these things to, design better technologies and organizational systems for humans.
Mm-hmm. How closely related are we to primates, really? Because I think people may hear, "Oh, studying primates, they're wild animals. They're so distant from us." But in reality, how closely related are we to them?
So we are primates. So of course, first of all, we are mammals. We know before we are vertebrates. So that, you are a vertebrate, you are a mammal. Within mammals, you have different types of mammals. You can be a whale, or you can be a canid and be a wolf. But within the mammals, we are primates. And within primates, we have the subgroup of great apes. So great apes are different from monkeys. Great apes are bigger, have bigger brains, have a bigger neocortex to brain ratio, and of course we have no tails.
Yeah.
So we are part of the primate family. We are also part of the great ape family, and part of our immediate family that includes orangutans, chimpanzees, bonobos, and gorillas, and of course all our ancestors that are dead. But so it's not, that you are an animal and you are a primate, and of course we are a very peculiar one, and that has followed its own evolutionary path. And it's not that bonobos are your ancestors, so they're your cousin. Mm-hmm. And the difference is that if you think how are you related to your cousin, you do not descend from your cousin, right? You share a last common ancestor. You share grandparents, mm-hmm. right? So you have this kind of common link in the past, and you're similar in some ways and different in others. And both of you have followed different evolutionary paths. This is not that they're that we descend from them, or they're better, or who's better. No, it's just like to have a broader lens to look at the primate family.
What were the biggest similarities that you noticed by observing bonobos and other great apes in the Congo?
Well, the first thing is that, like us, they're highly social. They are social animals. So they are always with others, not always, of course, and sometimes they take a distance too. They form friendships, they feel emotions, they have personalities, they have preferred partners with whom to groom, with whom to spend time, with whom to have sex, with whom to play. And there are all sorts of social dynamics that are very, very relatable. They also have, they grow up. So when they grow up in relation to play, they play less, but they still play. So that's very interesting. And and they play in different ways according to personality, but also according to changing context. Time of the year matters because sometimes there's more fruit, sometimes there's less fruit. When there's more fruit, they can, they literally are richer in time and energy. So you have more time to play. You have to spend less time, traveling to work, so to say, right? Things like that. So you think about, like broad questions that you can ask in nature, and then you think, what are the similarities in terms of principles that are happening in human societies and other societies?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So they're social animals. So
Yeah.
they play and interact with each other. Can you give any specific examples of what you saw, of how you saw primates interacting with each other, and how it was similar to how we maybe use play in our society or don't use play?
So bonobos interact through play and other social interactions, grooming, sex, and so on. And they play a lot. The ones that play most are, as expected, immature individuals, so the little ones, infants and juveniles. But the adults also play. So, for example, a typical play interaction would be Joe, Kitaro, and playing with Shiva. These are three juveniles. They run after each other, they jump, they slap each other. Bonobos laugh, and humans also laugh. So that's actually like a funny thing to observe at the beginning when you're not used to hearing bonobo laughter. And they laugh like that. You can hear a bonobo laughing if you Google BBC bonobo my name and then animals in love or bonobo laughter. Another typical play interaction in bonobos is adult males with immature. So bonobo males are very, very playful. They're kind of these gorgeous, relaxed, beautiful males that are kind of charismatic and very tolerant to younger ones. And many times they themselves initiate play. So they grab a bonobo and put them on their lap and tickle them or bite them. Sometimes do what I call the hang game. They will like just balance a smaller bonobo down over a branch. So you have many different types of play. Some of them are more energetic than others. Some of them are louder than others. Mothers also play with their infants.
Right.
Young adult females play with each other as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Why would they even play in the first place, I think? And because it seems like, is that even productive to what they are spending their time doing? Shouldn't they be working? Shouldn't they be looking out for danger? Isn't that sort of dangerous, essentially, to see them play?
That is the crux of the question. So you're in the wild, and also these are adult animals. So they have adult animal things to worry about, like eating and watching out for predators and looking after offspring. So why play? Well, if there is play in the wild, it must be doing something, right? It must be adaptive in some way. And so, there's a lot of discussion around this issue, but I think play is definitely adaptive. And what it does specifically, it depends on context. I think of it as a wild card. When you're playing a game and you have a joker, a wild card, you play the wild card according to context, and the value of the card is depending on the context, like the interactions between the players. So if you're a little one, it's really important for you to be learning how to behave with others, right? So play helps infants learn. Play is the way that young primates learn. You learn through playing. So, and then you go, well, but what about adults? If play is kind of this play for practice for adult skills, then the obvious thing would be that when you grow up, you stop playing.
Right.
Because, it's kind of thought of this like developmental scaffolding. It's useful to, like, how scaffolding is basically used to build a building, to
Mm-hmm.
construct a building. So once the building is finished, you take the scaffolding out,
Yeah.
right? So many people have thought of play in this sense as developmental scaffolding. Okay, young animals need it in order to build the adult individual. But once the adult individual is ready, the scaffolding can go away, i.e.
Yeah.
play finishes.
Yeah. They're done.
They're done
Yeah.
because, like, I went to school, and then of course you think, well, are we really finished? When are we finished? When you think of animals that live for a long time, like humans do, like bonobos do, elephants and so on, but also animals that live in complex social dynamics, animals that by definition will always face uncertainty, because of course the world is uncertain, but once you live in a social world, in a society that's always uncertain, you are in a way never finished, right? So play is very important for adults in that sense too, because it allows adults to keep, to not become rigid, to keep supple, to keep adaptive. You need to be able to change alongside with circumstances.
Yeah.
But to do that, you need to be able to be supple enough to recognize what are the circumstances and when are they changing and what strategy do I use now, and how am I aware of that?
Yeah.
And that's one layer, and it's not, of course, an easy thing to do. And then in addition, play is probably doing many other things as well. When I look at the older males playing, you go, surely there's so many benefits of just these guys. They're active, they're experiencing positive emotion. It's healthy for them. So I think there's a plethora of benefits. Some are the short term, some are long term, some we can measure better than others. Some, I don't know if we will be able to show in the wild, but like experimental work can provide better data. So you're kind of putting together different pieces of evidence to try to glean at this wider picture.
I love what you said about play keeping you adaptable and supple. And I mean,
Yes, yes,
I was just thinking about this morning before we had our conversation. Getting here,
yeah.
I had to our power went out and I went to public transportation and that wasn't working. And then I tried to find a motorized bike and that wasn't working. And then I found another bike and I finally got here and all I could do was just laugh about it. And I wasn't in a bad mood because life happens. And like you said, we can live even though we're advanced in our society with technology and with, just all the advancements that we have, life is still never certain. And so in order to be able to improv and be adaptable to life and what it throws at you, you need to have that mentality of adaptability.
Yes.
So, and play
Yes.
helps you do that.
Yes, that's very, very important, because like what happened to you today, you suddenly have to use your inner resources. And how do you develop those inner resources? Play allows you to practice and develop and grow these inner resources that you really never know how and when exactly you're going to use them. But today, you had to use them, and you were incredibly resourceful. You suddenly you had an extra card to play, and there's this kind of interaction between risk-taking in appropriate ways, knowing what to trust, knowing what not to trust, knowing what your boundaries are. Play is always testing and creating new boundaries. It's very, very complex. That's why, it's so important that not only children do it, but also adults. And also it's fun.
It is fun.
It is fun. It's fun for adults. I mean, it's fun for animals. It's fun for us. We feel alive when we're playing. We are completely connected. We're completely engaged in the activity. It plays the origin of flow. That's not a minor thing to feel alive and engaged.
For sure.
Yeah.
And why do you think then it is so challenging to maintain play in adulthood? If it is so natural to our biology, why do we do things that go against our biology in some ways then?
Well, we are very complex creatures, and the first thing is that our we need to understand that our biology is responding to environment and it's also responding to context. Part of our context is that we are adults. So it is also normal that we play less, and in a way appropriate because, we also need to do other stuff.
Yeah.
Like animals in the forest, you see the life of an adult and the life of a child and going like, oh, it's society that makes us. There is truth in that, but it's also okay. I think what's important is that to understand that play is healthy for adults and to find spaces to do it, and in particular to reduce stress and fear, because I think play arises in when you are relaxed and you have relative safety. Of course, this is a complex issue because it depends on personality, and some people are much more risk takers than others. So this is relative.
Yeah.
What for you hadn't taken an electric bike before, and you were courageous enough to do it. Some other people will go like, no way, and for somebody else might have not even noticed, etc. Play also needs social space. For example, take music. Dancing, music making. Music is a way that it's a technology, if you want, that where humans play, where humans play with themselves, with their skills, and with others. You go to a concert and you are literally at the same beat with so many others. So, adult play in humans today takes many shapes and sizes, from, improv to feasts to playing with words to, taking art class,
Yeah.
And to being outside to, playing with your dogs. It really shape shifts.
Yeah. So it's knowing yourself and knowing what conditions you need in order to play.
Yes, and creating them. Our particular challenge today is that we are energy rich but time poor. We have enough calories to play, right? Well, that's not an issue. And I mentioned that because in animals it is an issue when resources are very low. Animals are very, if you're like squalid, you need to allocate your priorities and survive, not put those calories into play. But we tend to have enough calories, but we are time poor. What I saw with the bonobos is that you really have to think. I mean, animals have time budgets in the same way that they have energy budgets. This is the amount of calories. How are you going to spend them? This is the amount of time you have. How are you going to spend it? And I think today we have two issues. One is the issue of stress and fear. So of course, making mistakes and being socially punished for that is a big issue. And the other issue is being time poor. So the luxury of play might depend on the luxury of time.
Yeah. If you're working a 80-hour-a-week job, it's hard to find time to play.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you need to sleep. Sleep is a biological attractor that is essential for resilience, but it's very possible that play is also that kind of biological attractor. We know it's related to resilience and long-term capacity to adapt. And we know it's, humor, for instance, is associated with resilience as well.
Do bonobos have any predators? Because I imagine the more in danger and more vigilant you are, the harder it is to, drop your guard down to play. So do bonobos have predators that may be attacking them at any time in the wild?
Yes, they have predators.
Okay.
However, because they live in groups, bonobos are always aware of their environment. But they play, and the little ones are kind of playing throughout the day. Adults are maintaining vigilance. But they create kind of spaces, times of play. So, for example, in mid-morning and late afternoon, you have this kind of very distinct time that looks very much like leisure, like in the same way that we socialize at night. and then you go, okay, now this is kind of playtime. It's different to hold a meeting at 11 in the morning than to hold a meeting at 8 at night. There is a different quality of it. And so bonobos have time when they socialize and everyone is more relaxed and playing. But of course, they still are always aware of the environment. But it's not like they're not being chased by predators the whole day. So of course, yeah.
Right. Yeah. Very. Yeah. Interesting. So because they live in groups, so they're safer for that reason, and then they're also very aware of their space and where they are and everything that's going around them, which helps them to play.
Yeah, play is full of this kind of apparent contradictions. It requires relative safety, but it takes risks. It is apparently expensive, but it also builds resources. And so it's not that we need perfectly safe environments that are guaranteed from lack of danger to play. I mean, at least animals play. I mean, you can't remove risk from life anyway entirely. But it is true that a minimum amount of trust in the environment and in the other individual is required for risk-taking in play. Take uncertainty. Animals abhor uncertainty, and so typically we are very stressed and scared of uncertainty. But when you are in a playful state, uncertainty is fun. So under playful mood, uncertainty is adventure. And that is bizarre if you think about it, because of course, why would it be? Obviously, it's understandable that uncertainty is a scary thing for any other animal. Like, duh, of course we want to know our outcomes. Of course I want to know whether, I'm not going to get dumped, or I'm going to get my paycheck at the end of the month, or I'm not going to suffer an attack. Yeah, it's not like an ideological issue. It makes sense that animals prefer certainty. But still, the fact is that life will always be uncertain, and living in a complex system means that you have to live with uncertain outcomes. There is no way out of it. No way out of it. And when under playful emotion, then uncertainty doesn't feel so scary. It's kind of more fun. And that's weird if you think about it. It is as if, evolution has given us this tool to deal with. It's a way of coping with uncertainty. We're like, oh yeah, I don't know the outcome. I think it's fun. I want to explore that. So uncertainty becomes adventure in that context.
Yeah. Oh, so play is a gift that evolution has given us to deal with uncertainty. Let's look at it that way.
Yes, for sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
And were you particularly interested in play when you went to study bonobos, or did this really come to light for you the more you studied them? And how has that changed your relationship to play?
Yeah, it's very interesting question to me, because I wasn't interested at all in play at the beginning. Because you see, because I was coming from a failure in the conservation world, I was interested in what for me were important and serious topics, grown-up topics in human behavior. So I wanted to study the evolution of cooperation and altruism. On one hand, to think about what are the conditions that would make humans more likely to be cooperative or altruistic towards each other and towards nature. I was also interested in the evolution of creativity in the context of thinking, how can we be more creative and more adaptive to come up with new stuff to adapt to this world where obviously we have so many challenges. I was interested in, in aggression and war, like really serious topics that had to do with what I saw as the most important aspects in the state of the world and the challenges. And to me, because I had never been particularly interested in children, I thought, oh, play is this kind of frivolous thing that kids do. I really never thought about it. I wasn't interested in play at all. Many play scholars have come to this much earlier in their lives, but I was like kind of a real nerd, and I'm not interested in play. I knew I wanted to study bonobos. And then one day I was trying to refine the topic for my dissertation, for my thesis, when I was doing my master's in Cambridge. And I realized that there was this behavior called play that really had to do with all these topics that I was interested in. You know, that if you study play, actually you can understand a lot about social dynamics and cooperation and bonding and trust, because of course play is in us and other primates social. So, you know, friends that play together stay together. So yeah, I'm like, oh wow, if I study this, I can learn a lot about dynamics of trust and cooperation and social bond. And then I also saw that play allowed me to study creativity, because play is the mother of creativity. You know, in play we come up with new things, as well as adaptability. With play we keep ourselves supple. And I thought, well, now this is interesting. And
It was a theme
yeah,
that kept popping up no matter where you looked.
exactly. And also an integrative theme, you know, one topic that would be like a kaleidoscope that would allow you to look at different phenomena. And I thought, well, this is very interesting. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's funny because I came to it like very late in my life, I think. But
No, never. It's never too late.
yeah,
Never too late. So, how has that transformed you personally, by looking at life through this lens of play now, having lived in the Congo with bonobos, which is very dangerous and crazy, and where you are in life now? How has that affected the way you look at life?
yeah, and not play and studying play in the wild is not necessarily playful at all. You know, it's very hard, and there are very real risks, including death, uh, way more often than one would like. So, well, and play has, you know, a dark side if you'd like it, and definitely risks and costs associated with it. So, the first layer was that I went like, oh, play is not only fun but also productive. So I tried to build it in in healthy ways in my life. So kind of going like, oh, actually going for a walk with my dogs and for a run and listening to music. But also I started pursuing it in much more directed ways. So for example, taking an improv class. When I moved to New York, I was thinking, okay, I really want to understand more finer dynamics of how adults are co-creating. You know, we have language and we create stories. So improv is, for example, a fantastic way where people, you know, following basic rules, come up with a story. And you go, it wasn't there. Nobody alone came up. It really emerged out of the interactions of the players. But I started not only putting play in my life, but also putting myself in situations that would allow me to do it at a personal level, but also gain more insights about the behavior itself. I always like rock concerts and festivals and live music, but I started pursuing festivals in a much more, you know, with the eye of the primatology. So like the whole story of Burning Man that we mentioned at the beginning was for me like going to the field and going, oh my God, I'm looking at adult apes playing in the wild. Like in the same way, I was looking at adult apes playing the wild in Congo. The only difference is that, you know, these ones are humans in the desert, not bonobos in the jungle. So, you know, so
Mm-hmm.
basically you are in that continuous interaction between personal experience, observation of the natural world, observation, and by that I mean also society and what we do, and then in interaction with what you know from the science of it and all your past experience. So it's this kind of it's kind of play itself, right? It's iterating and exploring boundaries and creating new thoughts all the time.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah,
Tell me about your experience at Burning Man, and it's the phenomenon of it is just so fascinating. I live in San Francisco, so I know plenty
yeah,
about it. For those that maybe don't know about Burning Man, though, why do you think 70,000 people, what is it, something like that,
yeah,
are
yeah.
drawn to such this unique festival with, and it has a variety of experiences you can have while you're there. But why do you think people are drawn to living in the desert for over, almost 2 weeks, with hardly any resources? Why
Yeah.
do you think that is the case?
It is basically, see, that's a very good question because if you abstract that question, it's the same question that why would bonobos play in the forest, right? It's basically asking why do adult animals that have, in theory, better things to do invest so much time, energy, effort, and willingly put themselves in an uncomfortable situation where there's an opportunity cost that you go like, well, these are people, surely they could be earning money, they could be doing all these other things. And yet, again and again, people choose to, go there and be stuck in the queue and, like
Not showered.
not shower and endure the dust and all the annoying things. And I think really it has to do with the nature of being a social primate. We live in communities. We need to feel that we belong. And so at the most basic level, Burning Man-like play, it allows people to exert these two deep needs. One is the one to belong, and the other one is the one to create and to express yourself. So people go for like different reasons, but at the end of the day, play is at the core of it. People go and build together, so they feel they're part of a group. People go and dance and create art and look at art and dress themselves up. So this phenomena of collective ritual and festivals, if you look in the archaeology of human in the last 15,000 years, it's clear that we've been feasting together from before that, that cities even existed. So it's something that is very important for also for people to come together from different groups. We play with our friends, but also during a festival, you feel, like the presence of the other that would typically be a much more distant and sometimes scary one is a closer one. So, and of course, Burning Man layers the issue that, creating art and then burning this art, it really puts you in contact with, the ephemeral quality of life. It has many, many layers, but it's kind of this concentrated pot of human experience and I think the more time we spend being digital, perhaps the more things like Burning Man we will need. Because we will need face-to-face contact, we will need social ritual, and the intensity of it is perhaps one way we're coping with the lack of frequency. If you see what I mean, we can either have, in the past, of course, we don't have digital interfaces, but we have fairly frequent face-to-face interactions that are more frequent, but also of lower intensity. I wonder whether the increase of things like live concerts and Burning Man type events is a response of the need for this kind of human encounter.
Yeah, a focused, intense time together.
Yeah, it's kind of like, okay, now this is time to play.
You mentioned a little bit ago about how in ancient civilizations people would dine together even before cities were formed. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more?
Typically, we have thought that, events like Burning Man, i.e. large-scale festivals where people, they're expensive, right? People have to plan ahead. You need to plan ahead food and drink, and you go to a place, and how do you coordinate people coming at the same time to this place? I mean, already that, it's a logistical problem. Typically, people have thought that in the human timeline, you have domestication of plants and animals, that agriculture, cities, and then the formation of cities allows for the creation of excess resources, right? And so people, they're, okay, now we have cities, we have excess resources, and we can spend them on festivals. And that is a narrative that kind of makes sense, right?
Logically.
Logically, yeah, it kind of makes sense. But what has been very interesting to me when delving into this topic is to see that the archaeology is starting to tell a slightly different story. For example, there's a site called Göbekli Tepe, which is there in the south of Turkey, near the border of Syria. And there are two excavation layers to it. One is 12,000 years old. And the 12,000-year-old layer has evidence that basically is kind of like the of extensive feasting. People were coming together to this place to share food, but also drink and create art. There's monumental art and dance. Of course, we cannot see them dancing, but the representations are of people like doing this kind of movement, and it really looks like people are dancing. It looks as if people were coming together and sharing food and drink for a few days for a festival. And yet we are still far away from the time that cities would appear. And there's no evidence for domestication of plants or animals. So these are hunter-gatherers that are coming together for feasts.
Yeah.
So I think, when I look at behavior, there's also times of the year when a community will go out and meet another community. So I've called these proto-festivals. It's a relatively uncommon thing to happen in non-human primates, but we have some examples. Chimpanzees do not do it. But you see the idea that there are times of the year when we actually have this committed time and meet with others that are not just our closest, friends and family, but engage in this like larger collective celebrations when we, enlarge our social networks, and there are all sorts of reciprocal exchanges. I think this is a very ancient pattern, and probably it's also very important to build complexity itself.
Yeah.
How do you build trading networks? You trade with people that are far away from you. Otherwise, that's by definition why trade is bringing value, right? Say if we exchange an obsidian material to create stone tools, then you probably are far away from me. If you're far away from me, you speak a different language. How do we build trust in order to build trade? I'm not saying that these kind of festivals are the only way these trading networks are built, but I think there is a relationship between this large-scale phenomena and the building of trust that is required for things like trading networks, but not only, also exchange of ideas, exchange of mating partners, etc., etc.
Right. Getting out of your box that you put yourself in. I love all of this because the first time I went to a conference or a festival and I worked for a cultural exchange company right out of college. All the experiences that brought me out of my normal routine, my rhythm, I always felt alive and I felt at home. And I never could really, I always thought, I'm just an extrovert. And I think that's part of it. But I think there's something in all of our biology that gravitates towards expanding our world outside of our little box.
No, and what you're saying is very important because I think we mustn't confuse kind of a narrative of play with a narrative of extroversion.
Right.
Like you, I'm also an extrovert, so I appreciate that as extroverts, we're kind of ridiculous in that kind of our seeking of reward. It's, extroverted. So we are more social and more risk-taking and so on. But it's not only extroverts play, introverts play too, very well and in different ways. There's play, so there's solitary play, there's play in the world of imagination, there's creative play that, it doesn't look like play perhaps to the untrained eye. So I think we mustn't forget that there are personality differences, and that's why play takes many shapes and it's so interesting. Like to ask people, how do you play? And like for you and I who are extroverts, some forms of play are not play. Perhaps, playing chess, it's like a horrifying thing.
Right.
Or carving wood, I don't know. But for other people, going to Burning Man is a horrifying thing.
Right.
And for others, it's play. So that's why it's also so interesting and complex, because it depends on the kind of on the makeup of that individual and their context.
Yes,
Yeah.
for sure. It's about what is it that expand makes you feel like you are expanding your world, and what does that look like for you? And
Yeah.
for us extroverts,
Yeah.
it might look like a festival or traveling, but not for everyone. So
No, for others might be being alone at home and reading fiction,
mhm.
poetry,
Yep.
and and so yeah, it takes many different shapes.
It does. It really does. Oh, thank you, Isabel, so much for this conversation. I'm so inspired by you, and I am just. I think it's so important to have this conversation about play from an evolutionary biology perspective, and just to understand that it is not frivolous. It is part of our biology, and you observed it in the wild. So thank you for that. I have a few fun rapid fire questions that we're going to go through, and then we'll close it with that. What did you want to be when you grew up?
Um, I don't remember. I think I knew what I wanted to do, not what I wanted to be.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, what I wanted to do was to explore and think and to live in the world, to dance with the world, maybe.
Yeah. If you could have any superpower at all, what would it be and why?
Being able to shape shift into different animals and to see the world and experience the world from their perspective, that would be
Ooh.
amazing.
Oh, I love that. Okay. Do you have any play idols or people that you look up to in the way that they use play in their life?
Yes, so many of the great musicians are for me play idols. Keith Richards and Peter Gabriel, for example,
Oh, yeah.
in their different styles, of course.
Yes.
Eh, many writers, I think the play of the imagination and creating of stories, it's wonderful one. Uh, I think many of the naturalists, also the way they experience nature, and awe as well as the infinite learning, it's very inspiring.
And then, lastly, any last remaining truths that you want to share about remaining playful for the rest of your life that you want to share with the audience?
Oh. One would be to carve time. Time is important. We are time poor. To be aware of being time poor and to be aware of chronic stress, because stress and fear kill play in animals, and that obviously includes us. And chronic stress is bad for your brain. Then just to really try to be in uncertainty with a playful mood, you'll have fun in different ways.
Try to approach uncertainty with play. I love that.
Yeah, I mean, not when it makes sense,
Yeah.
not the uncertainty of a bus coming at you.
Right.
There's a Chilean poet called Nicanor Parra that had a concept that I think is very, very appropriate to play. Actually, the concept came from the poet Keats that he called negative capability, right? But Parra summarized it as the ability to live in conflict without contradiction. And you go like, what is he talking about?
Yeah.
But I think he's really talking about the ability to tolerate uncertainty with a playful mood. And we don't have much choice anyway.
You
Right?
really don't. Make friends with uncertainty as much as you can, and do what you can to build up the resilience and the tools to deal with uncertainty. Thank you for listening to that episode with Isabel Behncke, primatologist and evolutionary biologist. Whenever I listen back on that conversation, I still can't believe that Isabel spent 3 years of her life in the wild studying primates. That sounds crazy to most of us because it can only be as dangerous, overwhelming, crazy as you can imagine. But I am so grateful that Isabel took the time to do this work because we have so much that we can learn from her about play and human behavior. I especially loved how Isabel talked about how play has really changed herself as a person. She describes herself as a self-proclaimed nerd that found play by accident. she wanted to study human behavior, and that's why she went to study bonobos. And she also used to study conservation. She went to study bonobos in the wild because she wanted to understand human behavior better. Play was an important thread and theme that kept popping up as she went to study bonobos. And it's really changed her as a person to discover play. She's much more of a playful person now. She goes to festivals like Burning Man and rock concerts, and she really enjoys life in a different way now that she has discovered play. So let's get into those little nuggets that we can learn from that conversation with Isabel. Number 1, play is an evolutionary need that serves a purpose that is not frivolous. When Isabel was living in the Congo, she noticed that primates play a lot. They are very social with each other, they groom, they tickle, they interact with each other, and it was very interesting because play on the surface seems very frivolous. It seems like it doesn't serve a purpose. So play takes energy and resources. So you would think a wild primate like a bonobo would spend that time and energy on something more productive, right? They should be using it to watch over their children and make sure that predators are not attacking them. But they still played. And she found that very unusual, so it must serve a need if they are spending their limited time and energy on play. And what she found was that bonobos use play in a very constructive way. They used it to adapt to their environment, to interact with each other, to connect and bond with each other, and to teach the infants how to navigate and interact in the world. So it really showed her that play is not frivolous even for us humans either. Play serves a larger purpose, and it helps us to navigate life in a complex society. And the more complex of an animal you are, like a bonobo and a human, actually the more important play is. So don't look at play as something frivolous. It's important for your evolutionary survival as a primate. Number 2. Play is evolution's gift for uncertainty. So Isabel mentioned that animals hate uncertainty. And it makes sense, right? It makes sense that we want to know what our outcomes are going to be and what results are going to happen if we do A, X, Y, or Z. And it makes sense, but life is never going to be certain, especially for animals like ourselves who live in complex dynamics and complex societies. So life is never going to be certain. But under a playful disposition, under a playful mood, uncertainty is not as scary. It's actually fun. So evolution has given us this gift of play to help us navigate uncertainty. And what a great gift it is. So take advantage of that gift and figure out how you can use play in your life to navigate uncertain times. An example of this could be taking an improv class. If you tune in to Gary Hirsch's episode from season 1, episode 2, you can learn a little bit more about improv. Practice putting yourself in uncertain situations and using play to navigate through them. It's going to help you deal with uncertainty better next time it comes about in your life. Number 3, play has been around a long time, even before cities and civilizations were formed. Isabel talked about how there is archaeological evidence that people gathered in a festival-like setting before cities and civilizations were formed in time, which is crazy if you think about it. You would think something like a festival and a party would only happen once a city has come together and resources have been put in place and infrastructure has been created to support something like this. So that is crazy if you think about it. A festival and a gathering and a party happened even before civilizations came about. So that is how natural play is. If you want to hear more from Isabel and read or watch more of her work, make sure you go to therecessedlife.com for the show notes, where I will link her TED Talk and other articles about her work. Are you looking for more play in your life? Make sure you're subscribed to the Recessed Life podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or any of the podcast platforms. You can also find the video interviews on YouTube. Don't forget to leave a review. Your feedback is so important to me and it helps others to find the podcast. You can also follow the conversation on Instagram at The Recessed Life. And lastly, you can go to therecessedlife.com where you'll find all the episodes and show notes on each of our guests. I hope this podcast helps you to become a little more playful today than you were yesterday. Until next time, don't forget to get out and play today.